A rainy day in Paris is still a day in Paris. Hey y'all, and welcome back to A Sense of Travel. I'm Michael, and I'm on a mission on this channel to document all 5 senses of as many cities, countries, and natural landmarks around the world as I possibly can, so that I can immerse you into those experiences through the screen. Well, this week, we are in the City of Lights, Paris, France, and y'all, I cannot wait to bring you along through all 5 senses and maybe even prove wrong some misconceptions you may have on what Paris smells like. So, let's dive in.
When I was in the first grade, I learned that my last name, Matheny, was French in origin. In fact, the name is tied to a small village in France called Matheny. Being who I am, I was immediately obsessed with and proud of my newly discovered French heritage. So much so that my life's dream quickly became to work as an elevator attendant at the Eiffel Tower. I was smitten by everything French, from Paris and its landmarks to the French flag to the language itself. I prelude this video with my childhood fascination with France because I think it's important for you to understand what France, and Paris specifically, had been built up in my mind as, even outside of the expectations that popular culture creates. To be there was, quite literally, my childhood dream. In reality, Paris wasn't what I had built it up to be in my mind. It was even better. Capturing Paris on the screen isn't enough. To really immerse yourself into the Paris experience, you need to use all 5 senses. And today, my goal is to bring you there through your imagination via its sights, sounds, tastes, feels, and smells. So, let's do it. When you imagine yourself in the heart of Paris, the first thing that may come to mind is the term wrought iron. At least, that's what happened to me. The boulevards, alleyways, and, most notably, buildings are a handsome beige or gray stone, rising above tree-lined streets in roughly 4 to 6 stories with, as you might guess, wrought iron balconies and accents alongside them. Despite having over 2 million residents and 13 million in the metro area, walking the streets of Paris feels almost romantic and certainly artfully picturesque. Everywhere you turn are cafés, bistros, and brasseries, most of which include outdoor covered patios, all of which are busy and bustling. Complete with sliding doors to open if it's warm or close when it's cold, Paris has mastered the art of alfresco dining. Despite not being as Disney World clean as many have built Paris up to be in their minds, it's still cleaner than many of the US cities I've visited. Perhaps except for Chicago and Boston. As you wander about the soft beige streets of central Paris, you'll notice that the streets have a rather distinguished soundscape. The sounds of crows cawing, pedestrians walking on pavement and cobblestone, silverware clanking in the outdoor dining patios, and tons of motorcycles echo throughout the elegant urban canyons. As for the smells...
So here's my controversial hot take. Unless you're hanging out under a bridge next to the river, Paris really doesn't smell bad.
A candle capturing the smell of Paris would smell of fruity cologne, sweet crepes, freshly baked baguettes, vape smoke, musk, wet stone, and damp air. Okay, and whatever, pee, but it's not as common as you'd think. The fact that it seems like it's almost always raining here probably helps wash away some of the less friendly odors. When walking down the boulevard in the morning, fresh baguette smells really do fill the air. Yeah, the myths are true. Central Paris is massive, but there are neighborhoods that can feel like their own little cities within the city. One of my favorite neighborhoods sits on and around a 430-foot tall hill in the 18th arrondissement. Montmartre. Classic, tight, and winding cobbled streets curve along the edge of the hill, with narrow and steep hidden staircases providing shortcuts up to the peak. The stately old buildings along the narrow cobbles lean at odd angles, creating a picture-perfect view as you climb. As you make your way into the charming, colorful central square, chock full of street dining, the sense of mustiness, restaurant foods, and sweet crepes join the artful sounds of French singing.
Aside from, I guess, the Eiffel Tower, I can't think of a part of town that feels more quintessentially Paris, just in general.
While the Eiffel Tower may be the most iconic place to view the city, and worry not, we'll head there soon, Sacré-Cœur Basilica atop Montmartre may be the best. Not only is the domed stone basilica itself absolutely gigantic, beautiful, and imposing, but the hilltop of Montmartre provides an overlook that I really don't know how to capture in words. I certainly wasn't able to capture it in videos. The endless expanse of metropolitan Paris twinkles in the night sky, glowing in a soft amber and white, with the Eiffel Tower and its glittering lights as its magnificent centerpiece. There was a lot of controversy at the opening ceremonies of the 2024 Olympics, but I think it's important to understand this. Paris is weird. It always has been, and I hope it always will be. This quirkiness and weirdness have created some of the best art humankind has ever seen or experienced. Near the base of Montmartre at Moulin Rouge, you'll find the heartbeat of Paris's unashamed expressionism. The birthplace of the once seductive can-can dance, Moulin Rouge and its flashing red windmill roof anchor the Pigalle district, famous for its theater, nightlife, and other, adult entertainment. This area has the energy of a classic carousel at a carnival. Paris literally glows at night. Yes, the Eiffel Tower glows and occasionally glitters, but in general, things just feel very golden. Even in the daytime, you'll notice a lot of golden accents on the buildings and gates, and towering, flamboyant golden statues atop marble pillars. Even the streetlights glow in a soft, orangey gold. River towns are usually hit or miss. Of course, you'd be hard-pressed to simplify Paris to just a river town, but nonetheless, Paris leverages the River Seine beautifully. Promenades line either side of the river pretty much throughout the entire city, adorned with small gardens, boat deck cafés, and arched stone bridges. By night, the river turns a deep, dark blue, reflecting the golden light of the city from its gentle ripples. It's quite a romantic experience, really.
About 3 years ago now, my mom's now husband, Markel, proposed to her on this spot. So Mom and Markel, if you're watching this, I want you to know it is just as beautiful as it was then, but not nearly as cold.
The River Seine is a lovely aqua, which, for a city as reputably dirty as Paris, although, as I mentioned, this is definitely based on perspective, was surprising. And, of course, clean as it looks, the Seine is not clean, so don't swim in it.
Now, to place yourself imaginatively into a Seine River walk. Well, for one, the soundscape is pretty interesting because you get the sounds of boats and, waves rippling and, crashing up against the kind of the promenade here, but you can still hear all of the auto traffic sounds in the city, and I find that kind of fascinating because Paris has a really good public transit system and metro system, but there's still so many cars, and I think it might just be because it's all stone and the alleyways are narrow, so it echoes a lot, but you'll hear the sounds of cars and engines revving and honking and motorcycles and sirens. Lots of sirens, those French-sounding sirens. It's very distinctive. And then, of course, the sound of the breeze, which is getting you kind of wet because all the trees are wet because it's always raining. But it's not cold out, it's just crisp and wet. Now, as for the smells, it really just smells like wet concrete and wet stone and wet earth, wet gravelly sand. The river water is present, but it's really not that strong. Overall, it smells fine. I don't get what people are talking about when they say Paris smells horrible. I really don't.
Getting around Paris on foot is great, but it's still a big city and it can hurt your knees to walk the entire thing. The Paris Metro system is intricate, covers the entire city, and even uses a few double-decker train cars. In some places, you can hear the heavy trains on their tracks above you. I've got to say, despite their reputation for frequent strike delays, I think Paris has one of the best, fastest, and easiest to figure out systems. It's especially nice on rainy days because, as I mentioned, it rains a lot in Paris. It feels like every day.
Every single day.
I want to add part of the reason Paris has a great public transit system. The city is incredibly dense. It's actually even denser than New York City, despite not having a skyline made up of skyscrapers. That doesn't mean there aren't beautiful expanses of green space, however. A beautiful example is the Jardin du Plant. This large green park is filled with elegant, tree-lined paths, minty and floral-smelling gardens, the sounds of birds chirping, your own footsteps on the sand, cool air, and a general recluse from the noise. I mean, you'll still hear things like hedge trimmers and construction noises outside of the park, but it's still quieter. This is also the home of the menagerie. The first time I visited Paris, I'll admit I was a bit surprised that I primarily heard French accents in passing, simply because Paris is such a cosmopolitan city and a global capital. Even more surprising to me was that Paris generally felt much less Americanized than other international cities I've been to. It was incredibly encouraging, as someone who idealizes the novelty of new places, to learn that Paris is still distinctively French. There are very few American chains along the streets. Not all signage includes English. Starbucks has not monopolized the coffee industry. Architecture is almost exclusively grand and ornamental. Chic fashion is distinctive, and outdoor dining at cafés and bistros is the norm. Oh, and speaking of fashion, the Avenue des Champs-Élysées is the epicenter of the Parisian fashion scene. The cobbled, tree-lined, broad, and elegant avenue is home to major high-end brands like Louis Vuitton, Yves Rocher, Bulgari, and so many more. Elegant, stately, 6-story buildings topped in gray chateau-style rooflines and coated in beige stone, Art Nouveau facades and wrought-iron balconies line either side of the tree-lined avenue.
Now, it's right around here that you get the full experience of the Parisian soundscape, right? Because you've got tons of traffic, so you hear a lot of cars, a lot of engines. You hear those French sirens, the one that kind of sounds almost whiny. Off in the distance, horns honking, pedestrians on cobbled stones. I mean, it's crazy, it's chaotic. But in a lot of ways, that's Paris. And not necessarily in a bad way, but it is an active city, put it that way.
In addition to the soundscape of Paris's epicenter of style, you'll catch wafts of various perfumes, cigarette smoke, musk, restaurant foods, and auto fumes. The damp, chilly air breezes through your hair as you take it all in. No matter who you are, where you're from, or what language you speak, you've probably seen Paris on a page or a screen. The city is straight up iconic, and I can't capture the Paris experience without taking you to some of the world's most famous landmarks. At the far end of Champs-Élysées is a symbol of not just Paris, but France as a whole. Towering over a truly chaotic roundabout is the massive stone Arc de Triomphe.
You want to get across? Gotta play a game of chicken.
I'm kidding, of course. There's a lovely underground tunnel to get you to the center, and it's worth it. As an homage to those who fought in the French Revolution, intricate carvings grace the interior of the gargantuan neoclassical arch where the iconic French tricolor hangs, billowing in the breeze. An eternal flame, honoring unidentified fallen soldiers from both world wars, burns at its base.
Some kids want to be astronauts. Some kids want to be actors. Some kids want to be firefighters or doctors or teachers. But I kid you not, when I was 5 years old, my dream job was to be an elevator attendant at the Eiffel Tower. I'd still do it.
Gustave Eiffel once said, "I should be jealous of the tower. It's more famous than me." And it's quite true. I would argue that most people couldn't imagine Paris without this absolutely gorgeous wrought iron centerpiece. The Eiffel Tower is mesmerizing both day and night. There were moments during my visit to Paris where I would simply stop and stare in the middle of the sidewalk in absolute awe. At over 1,000 feet tall, you can see the spire of the tower from quite a bit of the city. Once you get past the dozens of dudes hustling to sell you glittering, light-up Eiffel Tower miniatures amidst a sea of touristy crepe stands, which still smell good, of course, there is only a diagonal elevator ride up the side of the tower, standing in between you and one of the most beautiful overlooks in the world. Paris from above is an endless expanse of dense, winding buildings and streets coated in hues of white, gray, and deep greens and blues, set against a hazy gray-blue horizon of softly rolling hills. The low-rise skyline is graced by stone spires, ornate wrought-iron glass halls, domes, and graceful arches, but the cityscape is so vast that you would have to play a game of Where's Waldo to spot them all. The La Défense district skyscrapers are beautiful and relatively uniform in height, which adds a more urban feel just outside the city. It's freezing at 1,000 feet in the air, but the views are just immaculate. You can see the entire city and more from above, and its almost melancholic beauty is breathtaking. It's cold up here, and you'll hear the sound of the wind blowing across your ears along with tons of tourists and sirens. You'll feel the frigid gusts through your hair, and you'll experience the slightly out-of-body sensation of being at the top of one of the world's most famous structures.
So the Louvre is without a doubt one of the most famous museums in the world, and there's actually data to back that up. This is the most visited museum on the planet, ahead of the Vatican. There are over 500,000 objects within the museum, including the Mona Lisa, which, I've heard is underwhelming in real life, but I guess we'll have to see if that's true.
There's really no place on Earth quite like the Louvre. The sheer volume of priceless works of art spread across the absolutely massive palace, which covers 652,000 square feet, would take months upon months to get through in its entirety. The maze of a palace is extremely easy to get lost in, and I sure did. Now, I did mention that the Mona Lisa has a reputation for being a bit underwhelming, and, well, yep. An intriguing work of art for sure, but there is so much more to see, and I don't just mean the paintings. Jaw-dropping galleries of golden-laced ceilings, exquisitely painted frescoes, marble sculptures, and ornate walls fill the cavernous stone halls, connected by magnificent, sweeping staircases of marble.
This is the most incredible building I've ever been in my entire life, hands down.
As you imagine an afternoon in the Louvre, you'll need to imagine hot, stuffy air which smells kind of like body odor and musty stone. Echoing voices against the stone and shoes squeaking on the marble floors join the thick air. The Louvre Palace is home to one of the most famous museums in the world today, but it wasn't always a museum. On the lowest level of the palace, you can find remains of the original Louvre Castle, a Gothic 12th century fortress. It's the top floor that left me mind-boggled, though. Emperor Napoleon III lived here when the Louvre was the imperial palace, and let me just say, the Napoleonic apartment chambers are unbelievable. A maze of grand chambers greet you as you enter the wing, richly dripping in sheer elegance and regality. The Grand Salon, for example, looks like it's made of pure gold. These chambers are almost overwhelming to the senses. Every single thing, from the red satin drapery and carpets to the handsome wooden furniture to the ornate and detailed crown molding to the crystal-laced chandeliers, looks as if it was handcrafted for the emperor with detailed precision. As I said, you would have to spend months within the walls of the palace to experience it all, and by the time you did, you'd have to start all over again and soak it in.
When I was a kid, I'm talking like 5 years old, because my last name is French and I was obsessed with that, my favorite Disney cartoon was The Hunchback of Notre-Dame. I remember getting in arguments with my preschool teacher about this because I would always say I wanted to watch The Hunchback of Notre-Dame in class, and she would argue with me till she was blue in the face. It's Notre Dame, it's Notre Dame. Goodness. To my American viewers, it is Notre Dame. Notre Dame is a university in Indiana, and that's about it. And that's not meant to sound condescending, I think it's funny.
The Notre-Dame Cathedral, even after its 2019 fire, is a breathtaking sight to behold. The intricate Gothic designs along its windows, stone bell towers, and protective gargoyles remain intact after the destruction, and fortunately, the restoration of this magnificent Parisian cathedral keeps the original materials, designs, and artistic intricacies intact.
By the time you're seeing this vlog, Notre Dame has reopened. Sadly for me, it hasn't reopened at the time of this filming. Whoops.
Well, we've explored 4 of the 5 senses of the Paris experience, and as usual, I saved the best part for the end. What can I say here that hasn't already been said about the Parisian culinary scene? Dining in Paris is a sophisticated, classy experience no matter where you go. It's like every meal is a special occasion. Now, I want to try to prelude this by saying that I could not possibly try every French staple, and this is not meant to be an all-encompassing list. But here are some of the tastes I tried that I feel capture the experience of the city. Escargot. Escargot is a typical starter or even a main dish in France, and yes, they're snails. Just like mussels, you pull them right from the shell. Frankly, I think escargot is delicious. You just kind of have to get over the fact that you're eating a snail. These little guys mostly just taste like what they're cooked with, in this case, a lot of garlic and butter. Ratatouille. Most of my fellow Americans and I learned about this homemade French classic from the Disney and Pixar movie, but the French have known all along just how delicious ratatouille is. Rich, saucy, and filled with a strong taste of tomato puree and zucchini, I enjoyed my ratatouille with salmon, al fresco style, in the rain. Classic Paris.
You know what, Paris, I've embraced the rain. This is actually kind of nice.
Quiche Lorraine. This classic French dish from the Lorraine region is a quiche pie of eggs, cream, pork, and cheese. You can almost certainly taste the cream and cheese in this warm, savory slice, and alongside a piping cup of coffee, is perfect for a rainy Paris day. Frog legs. Between snails and frog legs, the French have certainly been creative in what they're down to eat. Fried and served with parsley, frog legs are considered a national delicacy in France. Honestly, with oil and seasoning, they're like a slightly squishier chicken wing. Not too bad. French baked goods. The scent of baking bread wafting through the elegant Parisian streets doesn't come from nowhere. Breakfast in Paris usually consists of fresh and delicious bread and pastries, and probably also a cigarette and coffee. Pain au chocolat and pain vienne were some of my favorites. Flaky, fluffy, buttery, and fresh, both of these bready French pastries are either filled with or covered in perfectly sweet chocolate. French red wine. Wine is an absolute must in France, and honestly, it can go with every meal, except perhaps breakfast. Bordeaux is the most commonly consumed in France, but I tried a few reds that were each excellent. With enough of these in your system, it isn't hard to see why Paris is regularly touted as the most romantic city in the world. As is the case with almost every city and country worldwide, a single visit to Paris isn't nearly enough to capture the full experience of the city. My hope, however, is that this video will leave you with a sense of Paris's sophisticated, romantic, and timeless splendor and has, in some way, brought the sensations of wandering the French capital to you. Thanks for watching, and until next time, au revoir.